Hi. My name is John, and I'm in the middle of a one-year residency at ITP, a grad program at NYU. So I'm going to be talking about the work that we've been doing with UNICEF in a class called Designing for UNICEF. So this is Clay Shirky, beloved faculty member at ITP, and about a year ago, he met these folks from the innovations group at UNICEF, Sharad, Chris, and Erica, whose self-described job is to start fires in other divisions of UNICEF. And they met and they loved each other and they said, let's do something together. Let's not think about it too much, let's just do it. And so when they said this and they announced the class and I saw it, I said, this came up into my mind and I said, you can't stop me, where do I sign up? So I want to talk a little bit about, first about the different views that I've developed in understanding how UNICEF functions as an organization. And this is the first view, the brand. Because fundamentally, that is one of the major things that UNICEF is. They have a 90% recognition globally. And they have this because ultimately, underneath that, they're comprised of doers. There's a layer of workers at UNICEF that just get it done. And when I say get it done, I mean vaccinating 56% of the world's population of children. They just do it. So the next thing to understand is that in order to get that done, there's a different layer of people at an organization like that do logistics. They are an enormous logistical operation, right? In 2007, they did 11,000 shipments over air and sea. They have a warehouse in Copenhagen that's the size of 4 football fields. And in order for these guys to do their job, you have these guys, the Excel spreadsheet people. They have an enormous IT infrastructure. This is an amazing Excel spreadsheet. What this is, it shows the distribution of monies that have been gathered towards Haiti, and it tells you what organization is doing what with that money and how much they still need to get it done. And they have a presence in 190 countries, which means that for them to do their job, for the IT to do their job, they need to be able to scale up, work with governments, scale down, work with very small NGOs at a local level. So those are the views: brand, logistics, doers, and IT. So when the class was first offered, I was a student, and we started thinking about the issues that UNICEF faces with water quality. And this is what a somewhat typical water source looks like in many parts of the world. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it looks like this. This is what disaster response looks like when it comes to water sources. And what happens is, disaster occurs, this is from Haiti, they say we have a very limited amount of time to get it done, and that's where the doers come in. And they say, we're going to blanket response, we're going to cover as much of the affected area because we have a limited amount of time. In Haiti right now, what they're looking at is the fact that rain season is coming, and rain season means a huge increase in potential for contamination and disease, the diarrhea. And the IT people have to create things like this as well. This is a 3W map. It says who's doing where what, because there are many different aid organizations in Haiti right now doing a lot of different kinds of work. So they need to understand who's doing what. So when we saw this, we said, wait a second, we've kind of seen this thing before. We said, what if we did a mashup? What if we were to create a kind of map that said, these are the areas that are much more affected than the other areas? So we started asking, we said, how do you determine this sort of thing? And they said, well, you do water quality testing, but that's the domain of the water quality people. And the water quality people aren't necessarily the disaster response, like get it done people, right? They use equipment like this, and this is the kind of equipment that does very precise, very accurate quality measurements. You know, it looks for arsenic, it looks for multiple contaminants, it tells you like the levels of contaminants, and it's really hard stuff to use. I have no idea how it works. But we said, well, what if we were to make something else? And we started working on it, and this is our 4th prototype. It's a very simple device that we were helped along by some amazing faculty members at ITP that does a very simple test. It says, is this safe, is this not safe? And it creates that map that we saw before. So right now we're testing, and hopefully if we get funding, we'll be doing a large-scale pilot test this year in Uganda. And what I want you to think about is the fact that it's not precise, but it's accurate enough to make an incremental difference in how disaster response can be done. This is to be put in the hands of the doers, and it sends back information to the logistics people that get stuff to them. So That was my project and my group. And then the second time the class was offered, I was a resident at ITP, and a student group started looking at something different in terms of disaster response. They started looking at what happens to children that lose their families. This is Cecile. She's a worker that is tasked with what's called family tracing and reunification. And it's a very sensitive thing, because UNICEF has to think a lot about the security of children, because, as I was told very simply, there are many bad people in the world who would love nothing more than to have a list of lost children, a list of children that they can just take out. And there was a couple of stories in the news over the last few months about stuff like this that happened in Haiti. So what they do is they find the children, they interview them, and these are traumatized kids, right? They have to ask them questions like, do you remember, do you remember where your uncles lived? Do you remember the name of your school? Because they have to gather as much information as they can. And that information is written down on pieces of paper, regular forms. And this goes back to the whole lowest common denominator. It doesn't matter what they have. What matters is making sure that they can get it done. So the forms get filled out, and what the students found out by talking to the people that do this sort of work was that many times it takes entire weeks for this stuff to get put into the database. And this is the kind of software that most people in this room don't actually see anymore, because it looks a little older, a little clunkier, but this has been very well designed with the primary security of children in mind. And so they were faced with this decision as a student group. They said, okay, do we ignore how it gets done and just start from the beginning, and we do something, I don't know, with RFID tags, with facial recognition? You know, it's a student project. They can do all sorts of stuff. Or do we do one smaller thing and try to make something that the aid workers can integrate into their workflow? And one of the benefits of thinking about the on-the-ground doers, the people who do the actual stuff, is that if you tell them, I have a way to make your job this much better, I have a way of making it so that the children can be reunited from 3 weeks to 1 week, they'll understand and they'll say, okay, this sounds good. But on the other hand, you also have to keep in mind the folks on the other level, on the IT level, that are thinking about this, because this is also very important, because a lot of thought and work went into this. So the students said, let's do the latter. And they said, we're going to take a step back and distance ourselves from the interagency database and all these other decisions, and we're just going to focus on one thing, making faster paper. And so throughout the rest of the semester, they created a nice, elegant interface that pretty much does this. But they also did something else. They abstracted the whole thing to an API. And they said, oh, no, we're not replacing your database. No, we would never do that. We just made faster paper. We just made an interface. I like to call it the political expediency of an API, of just being able to say, I'm not entering your domain, I'm just making faster paper. I'm not entering the other domain, the domain of like which devices this goes on, because like right now, the initial mock-up was made for an Android phone, but the fact of the matter is it's an API. And it's becoming an open source project, which means that you can have implementations for other clients as well. Jorge Just, one of the students in the class, who's actually here today, said that he thought of it as designing through lack of hubris. And you know, here's another part of the form. And you know, it has all the things that you're thinking about right now. Well, what if you don't have net access? It caches. Does it share with the other agencies? Yes, it does. And so the semester finished, great success, great project. And then Haiti happens. And Christopher from UNICEF calls and he says, they need rapid FTR on the ground right now. And what we have is 2 developers from ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a really nice software consultancy. And they've given us a month of their time to work on this. And the students said, yeah, let's do this. So even though the semester was over, they started working on it in their own time. And over the course of January and February, you know, they made some slight inroads into the project. But after the month was over, word got around within ThoughtWorks that there would be nobody working on this project anymore. And so what happened was, software developers from within the company, from different offices around the world said, I have time for this. Not official time, but I have time after work. I have time on weekends. So the project that started as 4 students in a class became 4 students and 2 developers, became this. And these are developers from the London office who came in on a Saturday to do a full day of coding on this project. And I want to take you back to the original view, the view of the brand, the view of UNICEF as the orange box, because these guys had the same exact feeling and they had the exact same feeling and response that I had, which was, where do I sign up? I want to do this. And that's what UNICEF does really, really well. They have the legitimacy of the work that they do, of having the safety and the sanctity of children in mind, and they make good on it. So the last thing that I want to leave you with is the fact that these two projects started out as 3-4 kids in a class doing a simple prototype and have snowballed into something slightly bigger. But it was 4 students during the course of 14-15 weeks. And you're going to start seeing a lot more of this. Even if it doesn't have to be within a class. The Crisis Commons people are awesome. They're doing amazing work. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of this. You're going to start seeing students and individuals volunteering their time and finding ways to bring new practices and better ideas into international agencies doing great work. Thank you.